A big trade including Nashville and San Jose as Yaroslav Askarov goes to the Sharks. We'll talk about that on today's episode and a couple more things on today's show on Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hattie Kalakash, joined by Sebastian High, and on today's show, we'll be discussing the trade between the Sharks and the Predators for Yaroslav Askarov. We'll talk about the return for San Jose. We'll talk about the return for Nashville. That's in our first two segments. Then in our first segment, we'll actually talk about Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway being released by the Edmonton Oilers after the offer sheet that was extended by the St. Louis Blues. They put the Oilers in a very tough spot. They tried to wriggle out of it by offloading Cody Cece's contract to who else but the Sharks. None of that worked, unfortunately, and they weren't able to retain both of them and sign them under the cap. We'll get into that in the third segment, though. But just before, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get up to $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. It's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. They've got a bunch of offers as well. We'll talk about that in the intermission as well regarding the FanDuel ad reads there. But also, if you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get things started right away here. Well, actually, beforehand, we actually have some news for you guys. If you guys follow us on Twitter, you're already aware. But go ahead with it, Sebastian. Tell everyone the good news.
Yeah, well, we are both making a bit of a change in terms of our scouting direction. So we switched away from Dobber prospects and that team. So we set the team up, hopefully very well for the future, and it's in fantastic hands. And we're very grateful for the time that we spent there. But we're both making a switch over to elite prospects to be scouting this season, where we're both going to be scouting in crossover roles. Hattie will be focusing on the QMJHL mainly. I'll be mainly focusing on the USHL, but there's going to be a lot of viewings had between us for basically every other prospect that's draft eligible. And we're very excited for this adventure, aren't we, Hattie?
Absolutely. It's a dream come true, and it's been a long time coming. It's been in the works for a while. We couldn't really talk about it too much, but we're glad that everything's official now, and yeah, it's been a blast. Went to the Holinka, met up with Cam Robinson and Daniel G, who are excellent people and great scouts over at Elite Prospects. And just overall, it's been such a great experience and such a great opportunity. And for me, it was always the end game. 5 years ago when I started this journey, I had a notes pad with my kind of 5-year plan moving forward to just keep me motivated. And the 5-year plan culminated in working for EP. And here I am 5 years later working for EP. So yeah, it's a dream come true, and we're both very, very happy for the switch. Obviously very, very sad to leave Dobber. I've spent the last 5 years with them. They've been a great source of learning and development for me as a scout. But it was time for a move, and I think we're both ready for that progression, and both very, very excited. So moving forward, we'll introduce ourselves in the show as QMJHL scout and USHL scout for Dobber for Elite Prospects. Look at that. Great mistake. But yeah, let's move right on with the episode now that the news is announced to you guys. I want to start off here with the return for San Jose. We'll talk about Yaroslav Askarov in detail, his game, where he stands for us in terms of goalie prospects, whether he's the best goalie prospect available, and all that good stuff. That's a discussion and a debate to have because there's a couple of contenders for sure. Let's get started right away here with size, handedness, what kind of totals he's put up, and what was the situation in Nashville that made him leave?
For sure. So Yaroslav Askarov is a 6'4", 179-pound right-catching goaltender who was drafted 11th overall in the 2020 NHL draft by the Nashville Predators. He's now 22 years old, having just turned that this summer. And he has been a player who's been on many radars for a very long time. He had some really dominant performances for Russian junior teams internationally growing up, and put up some massive results as well in the KHL in limited action that he saw there, but also throughout the MHL. His entire Russian career was really featuring a lot of like fantastic like stats, but also just individual performances. He's very athletic. He's very flashy in net. When he has a great game, he looks like he's a world-beating goaltender. That said, there has also been games that haven't been quite as good. We've both watched like a couple like iffy World Junior performances that Askarov has had, but he's been playing some really good hockey in Milwaukee in the AHL for 2 seasons now, where he's been the starting goaltender there, where he played 48 games a year ago, where he logged a 911 save percentage, and then 44 games last season, where he again put up a 911 save percentage. So very consistent in terms of results at the AHL level. He's even gotten into 2 NHL games with Nashville where he put up a 943. And this is a player who can really be a lights out, fantastic goaltender. When he's on his game, he is on his game, and he is also very confident when he's on his game. We've seen fantastic goaltending, like shootout winning celebrations from Askarov, like pressing the goal net and after the winning save, and some of those like on ice humorous antics, and really seeing the fun in the game, which flies well with teammates perhaps, and perhaps not quite as well with management, but there were many reasons contributing into the fact of him being like on the trade block in Nashville. On the one hand, there's just no real path to him becoming the starting goaltender there, with Jussi Saros having signed an 8-year extension with Nashville. There just really isn't a path for Askarov to be the goaltender, to really be at the front of an NHL franchise in Nashville. And on top of that, I think that there's a level of confidence in his play that rubbed some of the people in that management the wrong way. Whereas instead, he's moving to San Jose, where not only is he far and away the best goaltending prospect in that organization, he might already be the best goaltender in that organization. So a very different change of scenery here, where he'll be joining a young team. And I think it's going to be a really nice fit for him in San Jose. But talk me through a little bit of why he's going to fit in so nicely in the Bay Area. And secondly, where does he stand in terms of goaltending prospects for you? Because for me, the only clear one above him is Jesper Wallstedt.
For sure. I think I'm on the same page regarding that. Wallstedt being the better goaltender in terms of overall potential and upside. That's no knock on Askarov. That's just, Wallstedt just fits exactly what I'm looking for goalies. He's calm, he's composed, very, very kind of intelligent, capable of keeping plays in front of him. Askarov is a lot more about pure physical tools, athleticism, dynamism, skating, edge work, post-to-post explosiveness. That's more of Askarov's game, and that's totally fine. There are different ways to tend a goal, right? I mean, there's different profiles on that side, just like there's different profiles for forwards or defensemen. It's the same process on that end. But in terms of why the fit is so well, I think it's the lack of pressure on Askarov. There's no contention, for playoffs anywhere in sight for the moment for the Sharks, which is fine. It's a lull, for the longest time. They were one of the best teams in the NHL in terms of overall abilities, especially during the regular season. They had Joe Thornton, Joe Pavelski, Logan Couture. At one point, they're at the top of their game. This is just what happens in the NHL with parity and, with key players retiring. It's really rare teams that can stay at the top for a long while. So it's normal that the Sharks are in this lull, but I think that works really, really well for Askarov. Because first, like you said, I don't think there's a goaltender in the system in San Jose that really competes with Askarov in terms of overall abilities and talent. So he's got a clear shot at a starting role in San Jose. And there's not the pressure necessarily of putting up good results, dragging this team to a playoff spot, or any of that kind of stuff. He's really in a situation where he's going to be playing in front of a defense that's not really very, let's say it honestly, competent. Cody Ceci might be a top pair D on that roster, which is not a good sign. But yeah, overall, it's just, for me, it's the lack of pressure, and that suits Askarov's game really well. Because I think of Askarov when he's not under pressure, when, obviously he can play well when the stakes are high. We saw it in his couple of games in Nashville where he wanted to make an impression, and definitely did. But overall, I think that Askarov's at his best when he can just go out there and have fun. Because that's his mentality, that's his mindset. He's just a funny, enjoyable guy. Who likes life and likes hockey. You can see it in the way that he tended the goal last year from Milwaukee. He's just a fan of life, and I love those guys, and I always root for him. So I'm definitely rooting for Askarov to be able to maintain that once he gets to the NHL and plays there full time. I think it's inevitable that you see a lot of the same in a low pressure environment in San Jose, where again, there's nothing, there's nothing in terms of looking forward to playoff contention or anything like that, at least in the immediate 2-3 years down the line, once Askarov is settled, once, William Eklund and Macklin Celebrini and Quentin Musty and all those guys start to join the influx of forwards, and especially if San Jose can add a couple of defensemen to their prospect pool who are relatively ready soon, the likes of Blake Fiddler or even maybe Matt Schaefer, which would be an amazing addition to their pool in the 2025 NHL draft. Now we're looking at a team that is really going to be set for the future. I think they've got a in every position except for right D right now. It's the only spot that they're lacking, so they're in a great spot moving forward. But that's our first segment done. We'll get into the second segment where we look at the return for Nashville, because that was not a negligible return for them. We'll get into that in just a second, but just before, a quick word from our sponsors at eBay Motors.
Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, to LED headlights, exhaust kits, and far more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, eBay Motors always has exactly what it is that you are looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, which is available to U.S. customers only, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.
Alrighty, so let's move right on to our second segment where we talk about the return for Nashville. They got a decent haul for Yaroslav Askarov there, including a prospect who the Sharks got from Vegas for Thomas Hertl in a trade where we just went, of course, it's Vegas again. David Edstrom was the key part in that return. So let's actually break down the exact trade, because I don't think we've done that in the first segment. So the trade is to San Jose, Yaroslav Askarov, Nolan Burke, and a third-round pick in 2025. And to Nashville, David Edstrom, goaltender prospect Magnus Chrona, a 2025 conditional first-round pick. That's the return. And the condition's really simple. It's just that if Vegas's pick is in the top 10, San Jose has the option to provide their their first-round pick instead. So that's a pretty easy condition. The pick doesn't slide to a future year or anything like that. So basically, Nashville's guaranteed a pick in 2025, whether that's that it's probably going to be Winnipeg's. Did I say Winnipeg? Sorry. It's probably going to be the Vegas Golden Knights pick. Let's be honest. I don't think they're sliding out of playoff contention anytime soon. So yeah. So that's a return on that side. So let's start with Edstrom, because he's a decent prospect. He's developed fairly well in the SHL. He's a big center with defensive responsibilities. Talk me through his game in detail and what he kind of brings to Nashville's system.
For sure. So Edstrom is a 6'3", 190-pound left shot centerman, and he is a pure centerman. He plays a strong two-way game. He is big. He plays a heavy game. He's really intelligent in his defensive implications. He applies pressure. He's always sitting in the dangerous passing lanes. He plays a pretty straightforward, simple game. There isn't the most nuance in the world in the way he plays the game, but it is simple and it is very effective. There was a reason that he was a first-round draft pick by a team that had just won the Stanley Cup a year ago there when he was picked 32nd overall by the Vegas Golden Knights. Offensively, I think that he's a decent, like one-touch playmaker down low in terms of quick plays and bumping the puck to a teammate. He's not going to make like really dynamic playmaking type of things of like blowing past an entire defense, breaking down and over an entire defensive structure, dazzling you with a high degree of skill or creativity. But he's very middle driven. He gets to the dangerous areas. He's at his best off puck offensively, and he gets to really good spots off puck and is a really decent net front screen. He's good at getting rebounds. He has good hand-eye coordination. There's a lot to like with this player, and he's very projectable into a bottom six role at the NHL level, down the middle as a true centerman. Whether that ends up being on a fourth line or a third remains to be seen, but this is a player who most certainly will play some NHL NHL minutes at some point in some capacity. And I'm pretty sure he's going to be a long-term presence in a bottom six for the Nashville Predators. This past season as a D+1, he played with Frölunda in the SHL, where he scored 7 goals and 19 points in the regular season. And in the playoffs, he added another 2 goals and 6 points in 14 games. A player who has clearly been trusted already at the SHL level and brings a lot of maturity and predictability as well to the ice. Like, his teammates and his coaches know what to expect with David Edstrom when they put him on the ice, and the same thing is going to be true at the NHL level. So there's a lot to like with this player, but the overall upside isn't well within the top 6 role, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's mainly kind of what Edstrom, kind of projects as for me. Is I see him very much as a bona fide shutdown third line center who could potentially, for me, play as a complementary piece on a second line with some really good wingers as a prospect who, as a player who, I've seen some offensive upside from him, and I think he's so, for me, he's just so good defensively that I think that is still a possibility. But the most likely and the most realistic kind of upside and potential for me is still third line center. He just projects so well in that position as your first penalty killer, as your face-off taker in difficult situations, a prospect that you can match up against, higher end players and have him play well. That's mainly the role he's been playing in the SHL so far. He's kind of been the matchup center who plays against the highest scorers on the other team. So I see that continuing as he progresses. I find him a really interesting prospect. A quick word on Magnus Chrona, just in terms of size, handedness. Just talk me through that real quick.
Yeah, for sure. So Magnus Chrona is a hulking 6'6" left catching goaltender. He's 23 years old. He's a 2000 born player who was drafted in the 5th round in 2018 by the Tampa Bay Lightning. He played a full 4 seasons at the University of Denver as their starting goaltender, where he always every season was between a .907 and .920 save percentage there in college. And then this past season was his first professional year, where he played 9 games in the NHL, where he put up an .859 for San Jose.
It's
Again,
the Sharks.
Rookie goaltender playing like behind the Sharks defense. Give him a small break. And he also got into 31 AHL games, which with a really rough San Jose Barracuda team as well. He did not have too much luck in the defenses he was playing with. And in those 31 games, he had a 6-17-6 record, but he put up an .894. So the results were respectable for a rookie goaltender at the AHL level, but clearly the defensive core there wasn't all that much better than San Jose's itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Predators needed a goalie prospect who projects fairly well as a backup, because having Askarov is great in terms of trade value. But with UC Saros kind of being locked down long term as your starting goalie, you need someone who's going to be able to shoulder him well, and I think that's what Magnus Chrona projects as. He's a big and technically sound goalie, relatively smart, but doesn't blow you away with his awareness or his puck tracking. Relies a lot on his frame to make saves. That's basically the profile of a backup goalie. I think that's probably what he ends up being as he progresses. He's already 23, but goalies tend to bloom a bit later. I think by the time he's 26, 27, it's going to be a full-time backup in Nashville. So I think that's kind of my projection for him as well. And that conditional first-round pick in 2025. Let's talk about that for a second. I mean, there's a couple options in this draft. It does seem like a relatively weaker draft once you leave the kind of top 10. She's got decent options up there. Obviously, James Higgins, Porter Martone. You've got, Michael Misa. You've got, the list goes on and on. Matt Schaefer for me has locked himself into a top 3 conversation for me, especially with the viewings I got at the Linka. Overall, there's great value up top. The moment you leave the top 10, things get a bit tougher in terms of value. But a couple prospects I could see the Nashville Predators targeting with a pick in between the 20s and 30s. Adam Bannock's probably going to be there. I think that would be a fantastic add for the Predators in terms of what they need in their system. They need an influx of talent and skill and dynamism and intelligence. Bannock brings exactly that. Another undersized player I think they could target, LJ Mooney, who we absolutely love. His first name's Little John, by the way. That's what LJ stands for. He's 5'6", chock full of energy, just an absolute tree stump of a player, just buzzing around, making everyone's lives difficult on the forecheck. Incredibly skillful and a great playmaker as well. He's got some decent skill on him. I think the Preds can afford to have a player like that, given the core that they have right now. They've got a bunch of these gritty, kind of sizable forwards, relatively. So I think they can afford to go for an undersized player or two, have them influx into that system. Any other names in that range that you think could be great targets for the Predators? I'm thinking of some Q players off the top of my head, but that's only because I work as a Q Q scout for Elite Prospects now, which sounds so good, doesn't it?
It does indeed. I mean, definitely some decent options in the queue. I mean, I think Emile Guité would definitely fit what Nashville values in terms of prospects, with what they've been going out and getting in recent seasons. Beyond him, if you're looking on the defensive side of things, maybe Sasha Boumedienne drops. I think he could be a really interesting target if he's available in that range, but he could go anywhere between 5th overall and 25th overall. We're still in the summer before the draft year's begun. So who knows who's going to be available when, but there's definitely going to be some interesting names left on the table. And Nashville is never afraid of taking swings. But one thing I'll keep my eye on with them is that they are now a contending team with 3 first-round draft picks this season. I think they are in the trade market. I think they're going to be spending 1 or 2 of those picks on getting an influx of talent for right now. And I'm very curious to see what they do with that wealth of value that they just have sitting back there in their trunk, waiting to make use out of.
Absolutely, that's wow. A contending team with 3 first rounders. When's the last time we saw that? Anyway, that's our second segment done. We'll get into our third segment here, where we talk real quick about Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway's situations there with St. Louis. That's going to be a great segue into our next episode that'll be coming out on Wednesday regarding the St. Louis Blues. But before we get into that, just a quick word from our sponsors over at FanDuel.
You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a bit different for you here today. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a free 3-week trial of the NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. You can get so excited for that because the NFL is getting started now, and there's so many other sports that are really getting ramped up at the moment. The NHL is just about a month and a half or 2 months away, but we have a bunch of other leagues, whether it be in the soccer world. I mean, the MLS is in full swing right now. Marco Reus had a dominant debut for LA Galaxy. Or even over in Europe, we have the Premier League and the Bundesliga and all the other big leagues getting going as well, that you can take your big swings on. So whatever is your fancy, whether it's Major League Baseball or golf or football or whatever sport you're into, FanDuel is the place to be. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockdown to download America's #1 sportsbook.
Alrighty, so let's close things off with Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway in terms of the key move, I think, that made everyone a bit shocked once it happened, when the St. Louis Blues offer sheeted both of them for a relatively high amount, an amount that they knew that Edmonton would very much struggle and scramble to try to match there. Philip Broberg got signed to, I think, $4.523 million for 2 years. I think was the offer that they sheeted there, which was a maximum for a second round pick, if I'm not wrong, in terms of return there for Edmonton. And Dylan, yeah, exactly. And Dylan Holloway was offer sheet. I don't remember that amount. I have a feeling it's 2.5, 2.29, which is the maximum for a second rounder, if I'm not wrong, right?
It is exactly. Indeed.
So
third.
Their third rounder, exactly. Yeah. And then obviously Edmonton tried really, really hard to match that offer. They basically scrambled to get rid of Cody Cece's contract, and good for them, honestly. And that still wasn't enough. They weren't able to match both offer sheets, so they decided to not match them. And St. Louis got Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway for a second and a third round pick. First and foremost, in terms of return, let's not focus on the contract for the moment. Just in terms of return for Broberg and Holloway, a second and a third is well below what they would go on the market, right?
Significantly. These are two good young players that came into their own during the playoff run this past season on Edmonton's path to a Stanley Cup Game 7. I mean, Philip Broberg in the tail end of that playoff series, he only played 10 games in the entire playoffs, but the games he played, he was fantastic. He was a real top four piece for that Oilers team that was playing important minutes and also bringing a quality to the equation that Edmonton really lacked and needed in terms of the puck moving ability, the mobility from the blue line, and being able to turn defense into offense really quickly. Dylan Holloway also came up with some really important big goals throughout that playoff run for the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, he scored 5 goals in those 25 games. He had 2 assists for 7 points, but was really an impactful two-way piece throughout the playoff series, and definitely confirmed that he is now graduating from the AHL to the NHL. He still played 18 AHL games this past season, but he will not be playing there now that he is in St. Louis. I think these are two very good young players that at the moment are probably like Brober's probably a number 4, number 5 defenseman as of right now, and Holloway's probably a decent-ish third liner and getting comfortable in that kind of role. We'll see how that progresses with time, but what you're paying here is already kind of what roles they're going to be playing right now. Definitely playing a bit of a premium there because you're getting them below market value in terms of like the assets that you're giving up. So you're paying a little bit more to compensate for that. But I think they're two very talented young players that have a good chance of also working their way up the lineup, especially in the St. Louis system. I think that Broberg could easily be a top 4 piece long term, and I think that Holloway could be a second liner as well within about a year's time as well. I think that his development is going in a pretty steep upward trajectory, and they're two players that if I were an NHL GM, I also would have targeted, especially considering just how vulnerable Edmonton was with their situations.
Yeah, and let's not make any mistake. The AAV on these two players is well above what they would normally sign for, and this was just pure
For sure.
strategic elements from St. Louis. They don't think, I'm sure they don't think that Broberg's worth $4.5 million. He's a young player and he's a great player, but usually a prospect of that kind of caliber, those usually go for what, $2.5 million at the most.
Yeah.
And we're being generous on that side. We're talking about, yes, a big defenseman, and big defensemen get a premium, but he's a big defenseman that doesn't necessarily play physically. That's not his specialty. He's a puck mover. He's a great stick handler. He's a great kind of breakout passer, but he's not the type of player that's going to crush forwards along the boards or necessarily play a very, very physical game. He was able to up the physicality at least somewhat in the playoffs. That's more by necessity than by desire. And I think that overall, this was just pure strategy from them. In 2 years, when Broberg's offer sheeted contract ends, we're going to see, whether or not he's able to sign for similar AAV moving forward. But I believe it's still an RFA at the end of the contract.
Yes.
So his qualifying offer is going to be, I believe that the way it works is about $500K less than what they're currently signed for as the qualification, something like that. So, yes, the Blues are in a situation where they do have cap space. They're able to work with that. My question is, do they extend Broberg and kind of deal with the qualifying offer and kind of move forward with that similar AAV, or do we see a similar situation to Jesperi Kotkaniemi, where Kotkaniemi was signed, what was it, 6.1 mil for 1 year, and then promptly signed, what is it, an 8-year extension, 8-year extension of 4.8, right?
Yeah, correct. Which was underneath his qualifying offer. Like his qualifying offer was like a 5.2 or 5.3, but they signed him to term underneath that, which we're going to keep seeing how that ages for Carolina, but last season wasn't particularly promising for that contract.
For sure. So yeah, it's just an interesting situation overall that we'll keep a close look on. I'm especially curious to see how Broberg deals with the with minutes in St. Louis. I think the key part for both of them, and we'll get into that in tomorrow's episode more in detail, but I think the key part for both of them is stability. I think that Brober's would benefit a lot from playing as a number 4 defenseman long term in that system, playing on that second pair as a complementary piece. I think that's going to be a very, very good situation for him. And for Holloway, if you can get him on your third line full time, potentially even playing with Thomas or Kyrou in the top 6, I think that's a decent situation for him as well. But I'm pretty sure that we'll see Holloway full time on a third line, and I think that's a great situation for him to then develop further his skill set in the future. But that's our episode done. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our future shows as we continue on technically end our prospect coverage for the month of August in this week and head into September as we get ready for the 2024-25 NHL draft cycle. This has been Hadi Kalakesh, QMJHL scout for elite prospects. God, I love saying that. With Sebastian High, mainly USHL scout for elite prospects, and we hope you tune in next time.